wrapped in irony, satire, or exaggerated truth. So when the truth finally detonates, you were complicit. You laughed, you clapped, you shared the post. He is the whisper behind every movement that begins with liberation and ends in obsession. He's the face behind the mask behind the mask. And when the chaos finally peaks, when society fractures into 1,000 tribal echo chambers screaming at each other, he isn't hiding, he's clapping. The reason these entities matter isn't because they're lurking in your closet. It's because they're embedded in the operating system of your culture. They aren't coming, they're already here. Not as monsters, but as memes, as ideologies, as faceless trends with no origin and no endpoint, only replication. You felt it. The sense that something is wrong but too complex to articulate. That certain events feel staged, like someone's scripting mass confusion. That some ideas spread not because they make sense, but because they feel contagious. That's not paranoia. That's the design. These entities operate like viral code. They don't need bodies, they need belief systems. They possess not your mind, but your framework for interpreting reality. And once they've got it, everything you experience confirms their logic. That's the prison. That's the spell. And they don't work alone. Each of these cosmic intelligences overlaps. Yaldabaoth provides the rigid scaffolding, authority, hierarchy, blind obedience. Nyarlathotep injects the chaos, irony, inversion, controlled collapse. Together, they create a reality that gaslights you into questioning yourself while blindly trusting the machine. This isn't mythology. It's social programming wrapped in spiritual infection. And if you think ignoring them protects you, you've misunderstood how they work. These beings aren't sustained by belief. They're sustained by participation. Every time you repost a lie, because it's viral. Every time you accept a law, because it's legal. Every time you agree with someone just to avoid being labeled. That's the ritual. That's the offering. And they take it gladly. You can't kill what doesn't bleed. And these entities, these esoteric viruses of consciousness, aren't waiting behind a door for you to stumble into them. They've already been here. They're interwoven into language, systems, beliefs, fears. They operate like background software, running silently while you think you're in control. But you're not helpless. And that's the one thing they don't want you to realize. Because their greatest weapon isn't fear. It's invisibility. Awareness, in this context, is not just observation. It's exorcism. The moment you see how they work, you break their code. Not completely, not instantly, but cracks begin to form. You start noticing the loops, the fear disguised as caution, the guilt disguised as morality, the obsession disguised as enlightenment. The spell weakens, the programming stutters. And suddenly, you're no longer reacting, you're questioning. And that is the moment the parasite loses its grip. This isn't about becoming paranoid. It's about learning to observe without submission. You start to ask questions others are too tired or too scared to ask. Why is the hero always the one who restores order? Why is rebellion always punished? Why does our idea of success look identical to a slave's routine, just with nicer packaging? These aren't conspiracy theories. These are fractures in the story you've been fed. And once you see the cracks, you can't unsee them. And that's when the real war begins, internally. Because these entities don't just haunt culture, they've nested in you. In the quiet decisions you make every day. In the phrases you repeat, without thinking. That's just how it is. I don't want to make waves. It's not my place. Each one a tiny prayer to the gods of conformity. Each one a reinforcement of the very systems that profit from your silence. Breaking free means more than seeing the truth. It means choosing to live differently. Not performatively, not rebelliously for its own sake, but consciously, with clarity, with intention. Every time you choose authenticity over approval, every time you pause before reacting, every time you say, "What if I don't need to play this game?" you cut another thread in the web, and the web trembles. But this path isn't easy, because most people around you are still asleep. They're still possessed by the narratives that benefit someone else. They'll resist your clarity. They'll mock your insight. Not because you're wrong, but because your freedom threatens their comfort. This is not just a spiritual shift, it's a social one. And walking it requires courage, not to fight others, but to stay awake when sleep is safer. The key is not isolation, it's connection. Not with the masses, but with the few, who see it too. Because when awakened minds gather, not in paranoia, but in clarity, they become immune systems for the collective. They start asking better questions. They create new stories. They challenge old rituals, and those ripples spread faster than the programming. This is why you're here, not to escape, but to interrupt. Because when you strip the lies away, you don't just see the world more clearly. You start to rebuild it from within. No more false gods. No more invisible chains. Just the raw electric truth pulsing through everything, and the terrifying freedom of shaping your own reality. The entities we've explored in this video don't want to be fought. They want to be obeyed. They want your unconscious allegiance. And the only thing more dangerous than defying them is never knowing they were there in the first place. You don't need rituals. You don't need salt circles or Latin chants. You need awareness, and you need to hold it, fiercely, even when the world tries to lull you back to sleep. Because the truth doesn't comfort, it shatters. And in the ruins, you begin again. After everything you've just seen, heard, and remembered, because let's be honest, much of this lived somewhere in your subconscious already. The question that haunts you now isn't, what are these entities? It's, what do I do with this knowledge? Because awareness is only the beginning. Once the illusion fractures, you're left with silence. Not peace, not panic, just space. The space between what you were told life is and what it actually might be. And it's in that void that your real purpose is forged. The system gave you a prepackaged definition of meaning: work, obey, accumulate, die. But you've seen now that most of it was scaffolding. You've glimpsed the false light of Lucifer, the hollow patterns of Nyarlathotep, the bureaucratic blindness of Yaldabaoth. You've stood at the base of the inverted tree, stared into the black sun, and felt the press of identities that feed not on your actions, but your very attention. What's left when all of that is gone? You, but not the version you constructed for society. Not the performance, not the mask. The real you, the one before the name, before the scripts, before the imprinting. That self doesn't crave validation. It doesn't conform. It watches, learns, chooses. It creates. And that's exactly what the old systems fear. Not chaos, not violence, but unprogrammed minds choosing deliberately. The world doesn't change because you understand it. It changes because you act from a place of undistorted selfhood. That means turning awareness into will. Not forcing reality to bend, but aligning your actions with the deeper rhythm you now hear underneath the noise. That might mean living more simply. It might mean creating art that reflects what others are too afraid to admit. It might mean having difficult conversations that rupture old friendships, or walking away from systems that can no longer exploit your silence. But make no mistake, this path will cost you, because every step you take into authenticity demands the death of a previous identity. You'll feel it, the tension, the pull. You'll be tempted to go back into comfort, back into conformity, because the world is designed to reward the sleepwalker and punish the one who dares to dream awake. But if you've come this far, you already know comfort is just the bribe you get to betray yourself quietly. So what's next? You reclaim your narrative. You write your own rituals. You define your own success. Sculpt your own inner landscape, and become unrecognizable to a system that only knows how to categorize, commodify, and consume. And you won't do it alone. Because something strange happens when people wake up together. They stop waiting. They start building. Not utopias, not revolutions. Just real, conscious, sovereign lives. The ripple is slow at first, but it spreads. And when enough people stop feeding the old machine, it starves. That's why this matters. This isn't about horror. It's not even about esoterica. It's about reminding you that your mind was never supposed to be a cage, and the entities we've exposed, they only thrive in captivity. Shine the light, ask the questions, and they weaken. Live your truth, and they wither.